Do you remember chat rooms? A golden age where the internet was only just taking off, and no one had quite realized its full potential. There were people, however, that did see the potential, especially in its more perverse aspects. Number 1. When I was younger, I spent a good portion of my time chatting online to friends and strangers in chat rooms. Whenever I would stay with my friend Chelsea, we would be up all night on AIM and Yahoo Chat. It wasn't unusual for us to get completely random messages on AIM. You could easily type in any random name and location and search for people. So we would even add random people ourselves occasionally to chat. At some point, Chelsea began getting messages from a random guy, NC Guy 991. At the time, I was around 12 years old, making Chelsea roughly around 13 or 14. We both had countless internet friends with random weird people who talked to us constantly. We would even sometimes go to chat rooms and say we were younger than we actually were, to see what kind of freaks were out there. Then we'd call them out on being pedophiles and tell them that we were actually 20. It was something of a game to us. When I saw that Chelsea had been speaking to NC Guy 911, I didn't think much of it. I noticed he messaged her quite a lot, even when we were busy watching the hamster dance and not paying attention to our chat buddies. I ended up asking her about him, and she confessed that she was actually really creeped out by him, and he wouldn't leave her alone. It was unusual for either of us to get creeped out by anyone. We knew what kind of people were out there, and we knew that it was as simple as saying "piss off, you disgusting paedophile," to make the person on the other end feel ashamed and back off. However, this guy managed to get into her head. They started talking innocently enough. He randomly messaged her on AIM and said that he was visiting his niece and looking for people to chat to, since he was often home by himself whilst the family were at work and school. We thought that NC Guy meant nice guy, but it was North Carolina, which is where he was from. We both loved talking to new people, so Chelsea jumped at the chance to speak with him. She was suffering from depression at the time and had very low self-esteem and had been cutting herself. She got talking to the guy so much out of boredom that she ended up confiding in him late at night. After formatting some form of trust and knowing each other's age, Chelsea being 14 and he being 48, the questions began getting more personal. He would ask her if she'd ever had a boyfriend, what bra size she wore, and if she touched herself. Any other time, she would have told a person like this to go kill themselves. I wonder why she hadn't. I added the guy myself so I could find out what was going on with him. It didn't take the guy very long to start with his perverted questions towards me. Unlike Chelsea, I went off on him and told him what he's doing was illegal and disgusting. He would only respond by saying, "Hey, I'm just chatting here. I have a niece your age in school." To which I would respond, "That's unfortunate for your niece. Are you trying to molest her too?" He started telling me that I was a bad little girl and that he was going to punish me. He made me really uncomfortable, but for the most part I laughed it off and told him that he's disgusting. I asked Chelsea why she kept this guy on her list and why she would talk to someone like that for so long. She told me that whilst chatting to him at one point, he told her that he would be on his way to visit his niece. He picked up a 15-year-old prostitute, and he described the encounter in graphic detail and laughed about the girl being in tears, trying to get home. Chelsea was really creeped out by this, almost feeling like the guy had violated her, because she was around the same age as that girl. She told him that she didn't want to chat anymore because the stuff he'd been saying was creepy as shit. He got angry with her for telling him that they didn't want to be friends anymore, and he also said that he was going to be punishing her if she refused to chat. I convinced her to stop talking to him completely, and that it was an empty threat. He was just some freak trying to intimidate young girls. She ignored him for about 2 weeks. He tried to message her a couple of times, but not in an obsessive manner. So I guess that's why she didn't go to the extent of blocking him. However, on what was supposed to be the last night staying with his niece, she received a message from him. She said that she assumed it was going to be goodbye, but when she opened the message, it was an image file. It was a pretty large image, so scrolling from bottom to top, all we saw was dead, dry grass and leaves. We were a bit shaken up, thinking it was going to be a dead body he dumped or something. But when we zoomed out, it became clear. It was a picture of her house, from beside a grassy area next to her old swing set. We blocked him and got new screen names, and stopped going into chat rooms after that. We were terrified, but at the same time, we didn't want to get into trouble. So we didn't tell our parents what happened. Chelsea had already gotten into trouble before for telling random strangers that she wanted to kill herself, and the police showed up at her house. She wasn't supposed to be online at all. We liked to think that it was just some idiot we knew personally, who knew where we were and wanted to mess with us. But I really don't think that was the case. Either way, we never heard from him again. Number 2. When I was 17, I was always in Yahoo chat rooms. I was always chatting with people in the local Seattle rooms. Well, this one guy and I chatted a lot and decided to meet. We met at a Herfy's for lunch, and when he showed up, it was obvious the guy had lied about everything. The age, what he looked like. The guy even admitted that he lied about having a job, and he shows up to Herfy's on the bus. So we eat, and I say it was nice and then I have to go. As I walk away, this guy starts following me. I walked to a burger joint because I didn't live very far, and I didn't want this guy to follow me home. My mum was a flight attendant and was out of town. My mum had about a week left until her days off from flying, so I really didn't want this weirdo knowing where I lived. I started telling the guy I had some appointment to take care of to try and shake him off from following me, but he insisted it was okay and would go with me for the company. Not knowing what else to do, I stopped at a bus stop and waited for the bus to downtown Seattle. He stopped too, and got on the bus with me. The whole ride he kept trying to talk to me, asking me all sorts of questions. I would answer with the bare minimum, and fill in with lies because I didn't want him to know anything about me now. At one point he tried putting his arm around me and I just leaned away. So he tried putting his hand on my thigh, and I told him I didn't know him well enough for him to touch me. I felt sick to my stomach the whole bus ride, trying to rack my brain with what the hell I do once I got downtown. Once downtown, I walked over to the building where my best friend's mother worked. Since I knew the layout of the building, I could play it off. I told him I had to use the restroom. I asked the woman at the cafe if I could use the restroom, and she agreed. So there's a service delivery door outside that leads to this hallway, and this hallway has doors that lead to all the different shops and a service elevator to take things/merchandise to the other shops on the other levels. So I exited the cafe through the back door and into the hallway, and left the building out the door next to the docking bay. I took this as my chance to make my way to a bus stop to go home. I was going to take the express bus, and just get off at the airport instead of the other bus that takes forever. Well, as I make my way to the bus stop, I see the guy in the cafe still waiting for me. I managed to make it onto the bus, and never saw the guy again. However, a few nights later, I was on Yahoo Chat again when someone messaged me, and I told him I wanted to see a picture to know who I was talking to. He sent one. I see the picture and instantly pick up the phone and call one of my friends. The friend I call, his mum and aunt were really good friends with my mum and aunt, and our grandmother had been close friends too, back in Eastern Washington before either of us were born. So he answered and I started talking to him. "Hey, are you on Yahoo Chat right now?" "No, why?" "Someone is trying to talk to me and they gave me a picture of you claiming it was them." Well, I go back to talking to the guy online and he admits that it's not a picture of him. He admits who he is and he said that he felt we had a great connection, but lost me when we went downtown. He started to profess his love to me and everything. I cussed at the guy and told him I lost him on purpose. Then I changed my Yahoo name and never met anyone from Yahoo chat room in person ever again. Creepy, intelligent, clingy guy, please, let's never meet again. Number 3. So there was this guy I found in a chat room when I was around 12. The guy's name was Mike. He lived in California and apparently had a thing for younger girls, and was well aware of how old I was. He claimed he was only in his 20s, and since it was Yahoo, there was an icon indicating I had a webcam. Mike wanted me to send him dirty pictures of myself in return for pics of himself, and asked for my number. Being that I was 12 and wanted attention from guys, I didn't think anything of it at the time. Then things started to get even weirder. He would send me pics. Never of his face though, if you know what I mean. Mike told me he was willing to get a job down here, move and pretend to be my mother's boyfriend. He revealed that he wasn't actually 20. He was actually 36. This was over the phone. I told him it was too much. He then began to ask me to do things to myself over the phone. I was afraid that he possibly knew where I lived and was scared to tell my mum what I'd gotten myself into. Then something happened that ended Mike's perverted calls. Being as it happened 14 years ago, there was still dial-up, and whilst I had a phone in my room, there was a phone still in the living room as well as my mother's room. Mike usually would call around 3:30 when I was getting home from school because my mother worked an hour away, and he knew that she wouldn't be home closer until 5 p.m. Well, he called and I answered, and my mum ended up coming home early and needed to use the phone. I did not tell her I was already on it, so she picked up the phone and heard the things that he was saying to me, and she said, "Excuse me, who is this? Do you realize that the girl you are talking to is only 12? He hung up and never called back. Mike, I hope no one else had to deal with your sick behind, and I hope we never meet in real life. When I was 16, I was very insecure with myself. I had a hard time making friends, and I was basically invisible to boys. I made a lot of friends online in chat rooms. Mind you, this was back in the early to mid 2000s. It was during the summer, and I was staying with my sister to watch her kids because she broke her foot at a carnival, and my 2 nieces and nephew were a huge handful for her. So I got to stay up all night and use the computer. It was pretty lonely because I'd just moved from my old house following the divorce of my mother and stepfather, and couldn't really hang out with my friends for a while because of the situation. I spoke to a few guys, even video chatted a few times, but it was all pretty innocent. Until I met a guy from California. He wouldn't tell me his age and wouldn't even send me a picture, but I got the impression that he was an adult because he told me that he had his own apartment. He claimed his camera was broken. He also had tried to talk to me into coming out to visit him. He told me he would get me a ticket and that we could meet. He told me that I would have the time of my life and that we could do things together. He seemed excited about the fact that I've never been with a boy before. Anyway, after about a week, he convinces me to lift my shirt up so that he can see me. It took a lot of convincing. He was saying things like, "Come on, it's only me." Stupidly, I gave in. I didn't really think much about it afterwards, but I never did it again. I continued to talk to him, but when summer was winding down, my sister didn't need help anymore, so I wasn't at her house or able to use her computer. One day, about 2 weeks before school started back up, my best friend Amanda called and said, "Hey, so I have a question for you. Why am I looking at a picture of your tits right now?" I was completely floored. For a while I didn't even know what she was talking about. I didn't even know what to say. I could only ask for what she meant, and she told me that a random guy had sent her an attachment, and when she opened it, it was me. The guy's screen name was the guy I had been talking to. She'd also apparently gotten calls from other people that were friends, because they'd also gotten the picture. Apparently, this scumbag had hacked me. He got my friends list, and my neighbour got the picture. I know because he approached me about it. He was really nice and understanding about the situation. He had a sister about my age, and felt really protective of me. But oh my god, it was so embarrassing. I begged him not to tell my mother, which he didn't. Amanda had to get into her parents' email profiles because he had also hacked her list somehow and sent it to everyone on her list. Both her parents had emails with the attachment of the picture. They never found the picture though, and we were able to keep it pretty quiet. The only people who knew were my peers. I eventually got online and found about 100 messages from him. I finally messaged back and asked him why, and he said because I hadn't returned his messages. He got mad because I stopped talking to him. I told him that he'd ruined my life, and all he had to say was sorry before he blocked me. He didn't contact me anymore, and he didn't send out the picture anymore. But as far as I know, about 20 or 30 kids I'd gone to school with had all gotten the picture. I was very glad I didn't go to that school anymore. But every time I visited and we went around the town, and I saw people I'd gone to school with, I knew that they knew. They would point and laugh. I was never more glad that I did not have a computer at home. I didn't even use my AIM profile when I visited Amanda's or my sister's house. To the adult man who tried to completely ruin my life when I was in high school, because you felt that I had rejected you, I hope that you got caught somehow, and I hope that no one ever fell for your bullshit again. I hope you went to prison and had all those things that you wanted to do to me done to you. I hope to God we never meet. Number 5. So I grew up as a middle-class suburban dweeb. Middle son in a waspy family in a mostly stable home. Like many such children, I was left to my own devices quite a bit. When the first modem made its way into the house, along with AOL, I was hooked on the chat rooms. That was a pretty momentous occasion for me. Let me explain. I was a sexually precarious child. Before my teens, I was already desperate for it, despite not knowing what it actually meant. There wasn't really an outlet for it though, so it mostly meant me spending huge amounts of time alone in the room, thinking abstractly about the topic. When chat rooms became available, I entered the equation, because it gave me a wealth of people to talk about the topic with, and I was basically addicted. I would lurk in sexually explicit chat rooms for hours on end. After years of being a lurker, casually observing the discourse in the chat rooms, I started participating. Being the internet, it was mostly men, but I was crazed, and there was attention. I began to have pretty lucid chats, leading to cybersex. That was the days before the proliferation of digital cameras, or even scanners, so it was strictly text. I went on for a little while. In the generic hookup style chat rooms, I'd cyber with anyone who came my way. When they'd inevitably ask for my location, I'd give a suburb about 30 or 40 minutes away from where I really was. Until one day, I remember very clearly I'd been cybering with one guy in his late teens, only a handful of years older than me. When he asked where I lived, I lied, and returned the question to him. He replied that he lived in the suburb that I actually lived in. I confessed my lie, saying that I'd only lied to keep creepers away, and he commended me for the clever idea. And so it got to be that I'd cyber with this guy every couple of days. He'd ask me about phone sex, but I didn't want to get a call on my parents' line. Our sessions turned into discussions of what we would do if we met up. He said he knew the perfect place we could play in his car, and asked where a safe spot could be so that he could pick me up. I mentioned a park that was several blocks away. Things continued this way, strictly in the realm of fantasy for a while. Eventually, though, I started to lose interest. I wouldn't sign on for weeks at a time, then months, and then whenever I did, he would be there, ready to pick up where I left off. I was usually willing to oblige, because it was all just harmless idle fantasy. Years later, I'd all but forgotten about my account. We didn't have AOL anymore, and I'd made a newer account on my AIM. About 5 years after all of this had started, I was moving into my college dorm and setting up my new laptop, when I remembered my old handle and signed back in. It had been years since I'd last signed on. Surely enough, who IMs me first but my old friend. He asks me what I'm up to, and I tell him that I've moved. "Ah, shucks," he replies. "We never did meet up." "Yeah," I said. "Bummer." "It's a shame that date didn't work out." "What date?" I ask. "We were going to meet in Walgreens on your block, but you chickened out." I replied, "Oh, I don't think I remember that." I was racking my brains to recall such an event. There was in fact a Walgreens on my block, but it was relatively new. "We were going to meet in the parking lot, but you drove away before I could talk to you." I assured him he was mistaken, as I hadn't spoken to him since I'd gotten my license. "No man, for real, you were going to meet me in that black Ford Focus with the bike rack and the alien sticker on the back." The room seemed to swim. I felt like I was falling backwards. He correctly identified the car I was driving, but I'd never told him about it, nor mentioned the tiny details, nor sent him a picture that included my face. I'd sure I'd never set anything up. Was he deliberately messing with me? Just trying to let me know that he'd found me? Or had the years since this happened twisted my mind? Had he convinced himself that him stalking me was a meeting we'd arranged? I blocked him and tried to forget about it. I wasn't living in the same town anymore, and even though his stalking prowess was apparently good, I was a significant distance away, and a pretty athletic guy. If he found me again, I didn't think I'd have much to worry about. I'd nearly forgotten about the whole thing until the other day. This was well over a decade later at this point. My older brother and I were catching up, lamenting getting older. I told him that there was an old member of my graduating class that had already gone to jail for a felony and served his time. This led to a discussion about friends, classmates and such who had been arrested. He led with, "Remember Charles? I played football with him. He was arrested for sexing up kids he met online. Crazy." I looked up the case. He'd been tried and convicted for a slew of sex crimes. He had apparently been using the social sites like Xanga, MySpace and Friendster to meet young boys. He blackmailed and assaulted some of them when they wanted to break it off. The more I read, the more I got a heavy feeling in my stomach. I googled his AIM handle. It wasn't terribly unique. There were similar accounts named on all sorts of sites, which were definitely not him. But one, deeper in the results, was an account on a rollerblading forum. Skimming this account's post, I was positive it was the same person I'd been chatting with. Clicking the user profile statistics page, the last login was precisely the day before my brother's friend was arrested. At this point, I have more questions than answers. Could it really have been him? If it was it random chance? Did he know me through my brother? Is that how he was able to put a face to a name? Was he waiting in my neighborhood on purpose? Or was it coincidence? Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I never actually went on chat rooms when I was younger, but nonetheless, they sound absolutely terrifying. Did any of you ever experience anything in chat rooms? I'd love to know. Be sure to let me know in the comments section below, as well as your thoughts on this video. Remember that if you had a creepy or paranormal experience that you wish to share, feel free to send it to my email, which you can find in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter @TheMortisMedia for some secret stuff that you won't find anywhere else. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.